Today is the 5th day of this April 1984 7-day retreat. We will continue with working on the koan taken from the Mumonkan, called Ordinary Mind is Tao, or Ordinary Mind is the Way. Joshua had asked Nansen, what is Tao? And the answer was, ordinary mind is Tao. Then should we direct ourselves toward it or not? If you try to direct yourself toward it, it goes away from you, or you go away from it. If we don't try, how can we know Tao? Tao does not belong to knowing or to not knowing. Knowing is illusion, not knowing is blankness. If you really attain to Tao of no doubt, it is like the great void, so vast and boundless. How then can there be right and wrong in the Tao? We were at this particular statement, knowing is illusion, not knowing is blankness. Which was answer to the question, how can we know that we're there, that we've got it, or what it is? That's all we know, to know. Knowing Tao, the way, Buddhahood, enlightenment, liberation. Nansen says knowing is illusion. The concept or conceptualization is what he calls illusion. He gives it a label. You could also say a concept is a concept. A word is a word, an idea is an idea. A production of the computer. Produced from previous input. And the concept of freedom is not freedom. Idea of enlightenment is not enlightenment. No matter how much one has read about it, heard about it, thought about it, conversed or dialogued about it, all of that remains on the conceptual level. The operation of the brain, the cortex, whatever all else is involved in it. And the opposite of it, not knowing? Nansen says that's blankness. What we usually mean when we say, I don't know that, I don't know. Somebody asks us something, and because an answer isn't forthcoming, we say, I don't know. But usually this I don't know means, I don't know at this moment. Give me some time and I'll find out. Through reading something, asking somebody, or thinking about it for a while or for a long time. There's no finality to this I don't know that we utter most of the time. Just at this moment there's a blankness. I'll fill it. Then I'll let you know what I know. I think we talked yesterday or the day before about this dialogue between the Emperor of China and this man from India. Who, when he was asked, "Who are you? Aren't you a holy man?" said, "I don't know." Which didn't mean, let me think about it for a while and then I'll tell you. Let me think of some new identity. I don't like to be called a holy man. That doesn't fit my image. He didn't say, I don't know, because he had forgotten or because he was at a loss of giving an answer. He was showing something to this emperor. But it wasn't understood. Very difficult for an emperor, an established emperor, not only a ruler of the country, but also the epitome of religiousness, commenting himself on religious sutras, dialogues of the Buddha. To understand what it means not knowing who one is. It would mean dropping his identity as an emperor. And religious man. And whatever else identity there was, wouldn't necessarily have meant or mean dropping what he was doing, whatever ruling a country means. Whatever jobs have to be done, whatever functions have to be fulfilled. But in doing them, not knowing who one is, meaning not clinging to any idea of oneself as being that and all that goes with it. In the case of an emperor, the pride, feeling of sovereignty, of superiority, and the expectation of how others have to respond and to react to one. Well, one isn't an emperor or empress, but is it any easier to drop one's identity as being such and such, and needing to be treated as such and such? It's very difficult. And the difficult can be measured by the hurt we experience when we are not treated as we think we should be treated. When we're slighted or overruled. Misrepresented in gossip. Done injustice to. Or the other side of the coin, what feels as life-giving pleasure experienced when one is admired, kowtowed to. Other people a little bit scared of one, so they toe the line. Appreciated, thanked for what one has done. He says, it's all just image. Well, look for yourself. What it is that gets a boost or a put down. We come back to it so much because this is what is one of the main causes of friction in our relationship. Imagery of oneself and others. And therefore the inability to relate on the spot, freshly, meeting each other as though one had never met each other before. With old grudges simply dropped, wiped off the slate. Which, if this happens, allows a lovingness and affection to emerge which one may have never known, which one may never been able to deliberately produce, because it cannot be deliberately produced. It's there when all the images and their demands and fears are not there. Then we gravitate toward each other. We do. In a feeling of mutuality, communion, sharing of the same problems. So how does one go beyond knowing and not knowing, which is blankness? We described it. The not knowing which says, just give me some time. And then I'll come up with the answer. A not knowing which is not bound to any time, which makes no conditions for special effects, for outcome, for result, for reward, It is a state of being, of not knowing, and therefore free to look, attend, and relate. In a new way, which is unburdened by all one knows about oneself and the person right next to one, or very distant from one, in another country. How does one go beyond knowing and not knowing? Oh, knowing and blankness. Do you know? Do you want to know? Or can this not knowing happen right this instant, where one asks a question like this? Which we do ask all the time: how can I get beyond my totally disabling depression, which holds me totally prisoner? How can I get beyond it? What can I do about it? How can I get freedom from all my problems and burdens? And in asking this of oneself or of someone else, sort of, there is this wanting to receive answers. Or some magical intervention of some sort. Some magical happening. Is one able to start out with not knowing? Not knowing whether there is a way out? Not even knowing what the depression is? Because what one knows about it is how it felt yesterday, or 10 minutes ago, or during the last 10 years. But that's not what it is now. It is not. That's the truth. What is it now? If you don't know it, if you realize you can't know it with all you know, because that's the past, and that's not now, this instant. Not to recognize the burden, the heaviness, the pain, the sorrow, grief, but to approach it with this newness, this freshness and innocency of not knowing. Here, now. Joshua didn't ask, what is the way out of my personal miseries? Even though there may have been that. We don't know. Very likely there was, because he was a human being. wanting something, something more, something different. Or maybe just wandering unconditionally with what is truth. Maybe it was beyond wanting it. Maybe that had been seen through and dropped, and there was just a question, what is it? Which, if one asks a question like that, really empties out all thoughts about what something could be, should be, shouldn't be. Because one doesn't settle for any answer. One doesn't settle for anything known. The question persists. What is it? What is Tao? What is the truth? And it is the doubt itself that feeds it and fuels it. The doubt and the discontent or sorrow of life, whatever. May induce one to even ask such a question. That doesn't become something to overcome, but it becomes the fuel itself. It keeps this question alive. In the absence of any kind of answer that could be known. Nansen here does not go into any methods, ways to the way. There's an abrupt jump, if you will. He says, if you really attain to this Tao of no doubt, it is like the great void, vast and boundless. The words, if you attain to it, maybe an unfortunate translation, we don't know what he said in Chinese. Because in that there is no one to attain, it's the absence of the attainer, or of the wanter of attainment. It's the absence of that has been seen through as so much more imagery and idea. Here he just speaks from where he is. The words come out of this vastness and boundlessness of no doubt. The words trying to describe something that is indescribable, not capturable in words, and yet he uses them. Because the two of them are communicating with each other, they're talking to each other. One comes with a question, and the other responds. As well as he can respond with words. And yet there's much more in this communication that cannot be expressed in words, and yet is there. Here, this other jump, there's no logical consistency in it, he says. It's so vast and boundless. How then can there be right and wrong? In the Tao? He could have said good and bad. Right and wrong, praise and blame, reward and punishment. The opposites in which we've been raised, brought up, educated, and which we perpetuate through our thinking in those opposites. Always making us vacillate from one side to the other. It's sort of a basic food of the me, the ego, to think in terms of right and wrong. All of us in a retreat watch this ad infinitum, sitting, getting lost in thought, and coming to and thinking that this was wrong, to have thought. Or the content of what one was thinking about was good or bad. What may be going on in a retreat or next to one either likes or dislikes. It's almost, we're locked into that until we become profoundly aware of it. And in this awareness discover this incredible freedom not to have to like or dislike, but just to be with something as it is. Which doesn't mean a dullness of the mind, or being trained and not to criticize, to accept everything, say yes, yes, bow and serve. It's not that at all. It's just the clarity of seeing what's going on inside and out, what need is there for right and wrong. If it is dangerous, harmful, it's dropped. If it is really seen to be so, like if you stand bare feet in the midst of nice little green vines and somebody says, hey, this is poison ivy you're standing in. You jump. Nobody has to tell you how to jump. You wouldn't ask anybody, how do I get out of this? You just do. And here, knowing what poison ivy is helpful. You don't know what the person is talking about. You may pick some because they're quite pretty. But once you've had that rash, you know. To answer people's questions is, shouldn't we know anything, or should we get rid of knowledge or not have thoughts? They're very useful. At certain times, places, in certain activities, on our job. Couldn't be talking in English if I didn't know the language. Says here at this mentioning by Nansen of this vastness in which there is no right and wrong, Joshua had an opening. Something was clear, there was insight. It says he enlightened, he was suddenly enlightened. Did the words cause it? One can start thinking in those terms, what caused it? And usually if one watches, there's a motive behind such thoughts. If I only figure out what caused it, maybe I can get there myself in the same way. But amazingly enough, there is no cause for coming to clarity, or clarity being there, awakening, insight. One doesn't know. One really doesn't know. That's the beauty of it. In the commentary it says, Joshu suddenly brought up the question to Nansen, who explained it. But though the tile is disintegrating and the ice dissolving, the drain is still blocked up. Even though Joshua has come to a realization, he must delve into it for another 30 years before he can understand it fully. There's a story of someone coming to a Zen teacher asking, how long will it take me to come to enlightenment? Teacher saying, well, maybe 10 years, let's say. And the questioner says, that long? And the answer is 20 years. And then this person says, isn't there a quick way to it? And the teacher says, 50 years. Yeah, the plugged drain, what is it plugged with? Have you ever unplugged a drain? It's almost a pleasure. What all comes out. Sometimes it's endless, long hair, and all that clings to it, all the soap with which one has washed oneself so carefully, plugs the drain. But what one pulls out, one usually doesn't throw back down, one puts it aside. But it seems as one combs one's hair over the sink and washes and does all kinds of things, plugs up again, occasionally. Maybe something's wrong with the sink, with the drain. That it keeps collecting, no matter how often one one cleans it, something is obstructing in there. There's some obstruction in it, so it just keeps accumulating and collecting stuff. There's no amount of praying that will unplug a drain. One has to investigate it. Reach in there with a finger or with a tool, maybe unscrew the whole thing, take the whole thing apart, and look. Of course, one can also call a plumber. Because one says from the outset, I don't know anything about this, I can't do it, it's beyond me, needs an expert. So the plumber arrives and one leaves the kitchen. One doesn't want to be in the presence of all the messy tools, which are usually spread all over the floor. Or one may watch the plumber. One may not be able to do this physical work of unscrewing tight, what are they called, whatever, nuts or bolts, something. But one can watch. If one doesn't watch, a plumber and plumbing remains magic to one's thinking. If one watches, the magic becomes a very factual operation, which one can do oneself. Well, I may be going too far with this, but one understands it. What is the process of unplugging a stopped-up drain? Looking, removing. Actually, seeing the obstruction is all it takes, because of course one removes it. What was just said about if one really observes someone like a plumber in action and it takes the magic out of this operation, one substitutes images with fact, applies so well to relationship. When we're not really intimately in touch with our fellow human beings, with intimately I don't mean sexually, that's another thing, but I mean really being with people, observing them as much as is possible, understanding their difficulties and problems, their ups and downs. If one is in this touch, then one doesn't need to build an image about the person. One is in touch. One understands what the person goes through and how he or she deals with it, or is unable to cope with it, frictions that arise. When the whole thing is always clear and revealed, particularly if oneself is observing oneself with the same scrutiny as one observes someone else, one's own irritations or demands or disappointments and frustrations, it's all in this whole scene. It's there and watched. And therefore no need for images of the other person. If, however, one is not in touch and may not be able to be in touch with another person, one very quickly builds up images about this person because one doesn't know enough. One may think she's this way or she's that way, or he's this way or that way, And then one reacts to those images, and a whole bunch of stuff can build up in oneself. Resentments or aggravations. We do that. It's amazing, but we do. There's no need to do it, but it does happen. Not communicating with each other, not being in touch with each other, we substitute images for it. And then play around with these images in our mind, playing around meaning reacting to them. And it all can dissolve if communication is established, which is often not easy because the images that one has one is locked into them. One has already an idea what the other person thinks of me, and that's maybe oppressive or intimidating to say something, but it may not be true. It may not be so. So how can one communicate freely, frequently, openly, taking a risk of not being understood or being jumped on, taking that risk and working with it, instead of building up images, which in one way, as far as the operation of the brain is concerned, are very easy to manipulate, like figures on a chessboard. But it's not the real person. And so much harm and disharmony results from thinking of other people in terms of images rather than either abstaining from opinion about that person because one hasn't been in touch for a long while, one has not communicated for whatever reason. So one abstains from judging or having opinions, or one, if one needs to find out, one does establish communication, even though it's difficult. The other person has the same difficulty. We're all subject to the same processes. This statement here of giving a time limit before one can understand it fully is very dangerous. Maybe the Chinese, who have a way, or mythologically had a way with numbers, you so often find the 3 of this and the 5 of that and the 7 of that, not just the Chinese. Maybe 30 has a deeper symbolic meaning, because unless it does have that, it seems amazing to say it'll take you 30 years and then you understand it fully. How can one ever say that? How can there be any time limit? Understanding doesn't have anything to do with time or with deadlines. And this totality of life that we are part of it, we are that. What is its time limit? It's an absurd question. What can you say about it? All you know, if you look, is there's always something new, always something completely different if you don't have fixed ideas about it. In human relationships, certainly there's always something new coming up. There are all kinds of challenges at work, at home. building a new retreat center. It seems to be nothing but challenges. If you want to use that word, always something new. Unexpected, unforeseen. One can say 1,000 times, I should have foreseen that, but it's just an exercise in blaming oneself. One hasn't foreseen it. So, where is there an end to seeing and understanding? Looking at the whole thing without the burden of what was yesterday. It's endless. Of course it's endless. Or outside of time limits and time beginnings and dead ends. It just takes place from moment to moment. And if one lives that way, there is a regenerating energy that makes this all possible. When the me isn't all huddling in the little broom closet with all its woes. I'm not making fun and light of it. But we are huddled in the broom closet, aren't we? A lot of the time. Don't hear the birds, don't see the lake or the trees, the fields. And the people right next to us. Hundreds of flowers in spring. The moon in autumn. Cool breeze in the summer. Snow in winter. When vain thoughts don't hang around in the mind, every season is a good season. Even when it's not beautiful as what is described here, but floods or earthquakes, blizzards, drought, it is what it is. Can one meet it that way? When it's there? I don't know. One has to see. We will end here for today.